This hearing of the Subcommittee on Economic Growth, Energy Policy, and Regulatory Affairs will come to order. I want to welcome everybody for joining us today. Without objection, the Chair may declare recesses at any time. I recognize myself for the purpose of making an opening statement. Over the last 3.5 years into the Biden-Harris administration, many Americans are asking themselves this very important question. I remember when I was a kid in the 1980 campaign, challenger Governor Ronald Reagan looked at folks and asked, "Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago?" And I think every American should ask themselves that question when they go to the polls in the coming month and a half. Vice President Harris struggles to answer this question because she knows in most parts of the country the answer is an emphatic no. As we've discussed in the subcommittee a year ago, Bidenomics has had a devastating effect for families across this country and their ability to plan for the future. Households have watched their paychecks disappear while seeing the cost of goods and services rise. While President Biden claims his economic policies to restoring the American dream, too many find this dream just out of touch. Since the beginning of the Biden-Harris administration, total inflation as measured by the Consumer Price Index has risen 20.2%. Estimates show that Americans must now spend over $11,000 more each year to have the same quality of life that they had in January 2021. Grocery prices for goods such as bread, poultry, and cereal have all increased in price by 20%, and eggs nearly 50%. Gasoline used to transport these goods, that's increased by almost 50%, further driving costs up. Housing costs for mortgages and rent have both increased. Average rent prices are now 24% higher. Mortgage rates have doubled, making it nearly impossible for young Americans to afford their first home. Real wages, and this is very important, real wages for workers are also lower since the start of the Biden-Harris administration, further straining the ability to keep pace with rising prices. Businesses are struggling to cope with the $1.7 trillion in new regulatory costs the Biden-Harris administration has imposed on the American economy. This administration is engaged in massive regulatory overreach in an attempt to fundamentally alter or kill almost every energy and manufacturing industry job in that sector. This morning, the committee released a new report entitled "Death by 1,000 Regulations, the Biden-Harris Administration's Campaign to Bury America in Red Tape." I ask unanimous consent to enter that into the record. Without objection, so ordered. This report details the committee's findings on how the Biden-Harris administration's avalanche of costly regulations impact both businesses and consumers. The report also highlights effective legislative solutions this committee has been advancing to provide necessary reforms to the regulatory process. Of course, Biden-Harris regulatory onslaught is not the only way this administration has tried to impose their left-wing agenda on Americans. Last Congress, the administration, with the help from congressional Democrats, spent trillions of taxpayer dollars driving inflation and weakening our economy. The, quote, Inflation Reduction Act, unquote, and the, quote, American Rescue Plan, unquote, did not reduce inflation or rescue Americans. It did the opposite. Yet, Vice President Harris says Bidenomics is working. And both of these massive spending packages were simply slush funds for left-wing causes. The other side of the aisle wants to obscure the truth, claiming that greedflation or corporate greed is the invisible force driving these hardships. They want to ignore how the Biden-Harris administration's massive regulatory overreach and government spending are hurting the American people. They aren't interested in transparency or accountability. So today we have all of Congress. We continue to shine the light on the Biden-Harris administration. We will hold this administration accountable for the $1.7 trillion in new regulatory costs upon the economy at a time when it was needed the very least. We will hold the Biden-Harris administration accountable for the hidden taxes on consumers as businesses navigate these bureaucratic hurdles, raising prices, lowering wages to stay afloat. We will hold the Biden-Harris administration accountable for their destruction of the American dream for so many and really too many Americans. And Americans deserve answers. They're frustrated and believe their government is not listening to them when they sound the alarm on the economy. And you see this in the polls as to who can handle the economy better, and they're not polling well at all. Americans deserve better, and we need to do better if we have any hope in what we all want for ourselves and our children, which is to live the American dream. Our expert panel of witnesses is here to dispel many of the myths spun by the Biden-Harris administration and offer their insights into how we can right the wrongs of the Biden-Harris administration's economic policies. want to thank the witnesses for appearing before the subcommittee to share their insights, and I look forward to this discussion. And on an editor's note, I think it's very interesting that this administration has been known since its inception as the Biden-Harris administration, but now the Vice President wants you to forget about the hyphen and the Harris. I now recognize Ranking